Picture this. You spend your entire life working on something you'll never see finished. Your children carried on, then your grandchildren, and then their children after them. 2 centuries pass. The dream of a bridge becomes the lifeblood of an entire city. And finally, after 200 long years, it is complete. But then within weeks, it crumbles. This is not a legend. This is real history. The tragic story of the bridge that took 200 years to build and collapsed almost as soon as it stood. Why build a bridge? In medieval Europe, rivers were not just natural landscapes. They were boundaries. They could be lifelines for trade, but they could also be deadly obstacles. For one ambitious city, the dream of bridging its great river became both a practical need and a powerful symbol of pride. Merchants longed for faster, safer passage. Soldiers wanted a strong crossing for armies. Priests believed a great bridge would honor God. And ordinary townsfolk? They simply wanted a way across without risking their lives on rickety boats. So, in the early 1300s, the city laid down its dream to build a bridge greater than any the world had seen. The first stones, 14th century. The early stages were brutal. Without cranes, steel, or modern foundations, builders relied on wooden scaffolding, ropes, pulleys, and sheer manpower. Imagine the scene. Stonemasons striking stone with iron chisels, sparks flying. Laborers hauling blocks on wooden carts. Horses pulling timber through muddy streets. The sound of hammers echoed across the riverbanks day and night. But rivers are unforgiving. Spring floods swallowed entire sections of scaffolding. Heavy stones slipped from ropes and crushed workers below. Some drowned as currents pulled them under. Yet, despite these setbacks, the city pushed forward. Priests sprinkled holy water on the foundations. Bells rang to bless the progress. To the people, this bridge was more than stone and mortar. It was destiny. But destiny doesn't bend so easily. A brutal winter came. The river froze, then thawed violently, tearing away months of work. By the time the thaw ended, much of the progress had been destroyed. The bridge had barely begun, and it was already fighting for survival. A family legacy, 15th century. By the 1400s, something remarkable had happened. The project had outlived its original architects. Fathers passed chisels to sons, who passed them to grandsons. Entire families were bound to the bridge's construction. Children grew up watching their fathers return from the riverbank, their hands raw from stone dust, their backs bent with exhaustion. For them, the bridge wasn't just a project. It was their inheritance, their family's burden, their legacy. One mason might say to his son, "Your grandfather worked these stones. One day you will too, and perhaps your son after you." This was how medieval projects endured. Cathedrals, towers, and now this bridge. People worked not for themselves, but for the future. Still, frustration grew. Decades passed with little progress. Plague swept across Europe, killing thousands, including many workers. Wars drained resources. Whole sections of the bridge sat unfinished, abandoned when funds ran dry. By the late 15th century, travelers began mocking it. They wrote in their journals about the bridge that grows, yet never crosses. The Renaissance vision, 16th century. When the Renaissance dawned, it brought fresh hope. Engineering knowledge expanded. Architects studied the works of Rome, marveling at aqueducts and arches that had stood for centuries. Surely, they thought, this bridge could stand too. New designs were drawn, grander, more ambitious. Decorative towers were added. Marble facades, statues of saints, balustrades carved with angels. The bridge was no longer just practical. It was meant to be a work of art. But ambition is expensive. Wars with neighboring states drained coffers. Famine struck the countryside. 4 years at a time, construction halted. The half-finished arches standing like broken teeth in the river. Merchants complained. Soldiers grew impatient. But the city could not abandon it. Not now. Too much pride, too much money, and too many lives had already been poured into the project. The bridge had become both a promise and a curse. Daily life on the bridge site, life for the workers, was harsh. Stonemasons rose before dawn, sharpening their chisels. Laborers hauled stones until their shoulders bled. Blacksmiths forged iron clamps, while carpenters built scaffolds that creaked above the rushing water. There were accidents. A falling block could crush a man instantly. A slip on wet scaffolding could mean drowning in the river below. Priests often held funerals for workers right on the riverbank, the same place where their brothers continued to labor. And yet, there was also pride. Workers carved their initials into hidden stones, leaving behind tiny marks of their existence. They knew the bridge might outlive them, but at least their hand had touched it. The final push, 17th to 18th century. By the 1600s, the bridge was already legendary. Generations had been born and died under its shadow, still incomplete. But finally, a new wave of determination arrived. The city poured money into the project. Foreign engineers were hired. Workers labored day and night. Pillars rose taller. Arches locked into place. Statues were hauled into position. By the mid-1700s, the impossible seemed within reach. The bridge stretched across the river at last. Crowds gathered to watch the final stone laid. Priests blessed it. Musicians played drums and flutes. Merchants set up stalls along its edges, selling wine and roasted meat. 2 centuries of human labor had come together. The dream was real. For one shining moment, the city celebrated like never before. Fireworks burst in the sky. Bells rang from every tower. People wept, kissed, and danced upon the bridge. It was finished. The collapse. But history is cruel. Only weeks after its opening, cracks appeared. At first, small, almost invisible, then widening. Stones shifted. Foundations trembled. Engineers inspected nervously. Some whispered that the riverbed had been too unstable. Others feared the weight of the decorative towers was too much. Whatever the cause, the bridge was failing. And then disaster struck. One night, with a roar like thunder, entire sections gave way. Massive stone blocks plunged into the rushing water. Arches crumbled like dry clay. Statues toppled into the river. Citizens awoke to chaos. Torches lit the scene as crowds gathered on the riverbanks, weeping, shouting, unable to look away. In just a few hours, 2 centuries of labor, generations of sacrifice, were undone. Eyewitness accounts. Stories spread quickly. A merchant claimed he saw statues fall like angels cast from heaven. A priest called it God's punishment for human arrogance. Mothers told their children never to trust dreams too large for men to build. Some claimed they heard the river laugh as it swallowed the stones. Others swore the bridge groaned like a dying beast before collapsing. Whatever people believed, one thing was certain. The bridge was gone. The collapse devastated the city. Trade suffered. Morale plummeted. Many citizens felt betrayed by leaders, by engineers, even by God. For workers, it was a heartbreak beyond words. Imagine giving your whole life to a project, only to watch it vanish in a single night. Fathers who had spent decades carving stone wept openly on the riverbanks. Some swore never to touch a chisel again. And yet, in time, life moved on. Boats returned to ferry goods across the river. Traders found other routes. But the ruins remained, half-submerged pillars, jagged stones jetting from the water, like the bones of a fallen giant. Travelers from faraway lands came to see the wreck, calling it the bridge that never was. The legacy. Today, the bridge is remembered not as a triumph, but as a lesson. It stands as a symbol of human ambition, our drive to create something that outlives us, even when the odds are against us. Yes, the bridge failed, but in a way, it succeeded. It became a story, a reminder that even failure can leave behind something powerful. Because maybe the true bridge wasn't a stone at all. Maybe it was a bridge of memory, connecting fathers to sons, workers to generations, a city to its history. Clapperboard closing narration. Not all victories stand the test of time. Some crumble, some vanish. But the story of the bridge that took 200 years to build and collapsed remains. A story of ambition, sacrifice, and the fragile line between triumph and tragedy. And in the end, maybe the story itself is the real monument. The end. Second story. The world's oldest toilet system. Clapperboard 30-second hook opening. When you think of ancient history, you might picture kings, pyramids, and great battles. But what about the bathroom? What if I told you that thousands of years ago, long before modern plumbing, people were already building toilets, and not just holes in the ground, but entire systems of sewage, drainage, and hygiene? Today, we're traveling back in time to uncover the surprising story of the world's oldest toilet system and how it proves that our ancestors were far more advanced than we often imagine. The forgotten side of civilization. We tend to think of history in terms of glory, palaces, temples, conquests, but daily life is often ignored. And what could be more daily, more universal than the need for a toilet? The truth is, sanitation has always been at the heart of civilization. A city is not just about walls and markets. It's about how thousands of people live together without drowning in their own waste. If a society can solve that problem, it can thrive. If it cannot, disease spreads, people die, and kingdoms collapse. So it should not surprise us that some of the earliest civilizations in the world, long before Rome's aqueducts or London's sewers, were already building toilets. Real working toilets. Step into the Indus Valley, around 2500 BCE. The Indus Valley civilization, which thrived in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, is where historians found some of the earliest evidence of a true sanitation system. Picture the city of Mohenjo-Daro, over 4,000 years ago. Streets laid out in a grid, houses built from baked bricks, wells providing clean water, and in many of those houses, a private bathroom. Yes, private bathrooms, complete with drains and even seats. Archaeologists discovered that waste from these houses flowed into covered drains along the streets. The drains led into soak pits or cesspools, far away from where people lived and worked. In other words, they weren't just digging holes. They were designing a city with hygiene at its core. This is staggering when you realize many medieval European cities, thousands of years later, still had people throwing chamber pots out the window into the streets below. The Indus Valley people were ahead of their time. The toilets themselves. So, what did these ancient toilets look like? Many were simple brick platforms with a hole on top, sometimes with a smooth stone slab where a person could sit. Beneath, a vertical chute carried waste into a drain. Water from household wells or jars was poured to flush it down. This is why historians often say Mohenjo-Daro had flushing toilets long before Rome. Imagine stepping into a bathroom in 2500 BCE, a small, clean room tiled with bricks, maybe with a pot of water standing nearby. It's not so different from today. Why it mattered. Sanitation wasn't just about comfort, it was survival. In a city of 40,000 people like Mohenjo-Daro, waste could have quickly turned the streets into cesspools of disease. Instead, the Indus system helped keep water sources separate from waste. Wells provided drinking water. Toilets carried sewage away. This kind of planning shows us that the Indus people understood, even if not scientifically, the connection between hygiene and health. And this wasn't just in the rich homes. Archaeologists found toilets even in modest houses, suggesting sanitation wasn't a luxury for elites. It was for everyone. Other ancient sanitation systems. The Indus Valley wasn't alone. Across the ancient world, civilizations found their own ways to manage waste. Ancient Mesopotamia had pits lined with clay jars for waste disposal. Minoan Crete, around 1700 BCE, built advanced plumbing systems, including what some call the first flushing toilets, with water channels running through palaces. Ancient Egypt used limestone seats placed over sand-filled containers. Ancient China had early latrine systems connected to pigsties, turning waste into fertilizer. Each culture solved the problem in its own way, but the Indus Valley stands out because of its scale, a citywide sanitation network that worked like a miniature version of a modern sewer system. Daily life with ancient toilets. Imagine living in Mohenjo-Daro. You wake up at dawn. You fetch water from your well. And when nature calls, you don't walk to the fields. You step into a small room in your own house, squat or sit, pour a little water to flush, and continue with your day. Outside, covered drains carry the waste away. Workers might occasionally clean the drains, removing buildup. In this way, the system stayed functional for centuries. This tells us something powerful. The people of the Indus Valley valued cleanliness. To them, hygiene wasn't secondary. It was part of what it meant to live in a city. The collapse of cleanliness. But what happened? If the Indus Valley was so advanced, why didn't later civilizations copy them? The sad truth is we don't fully know. Around 1900 BCE, the Indus cities began to decline. Climate change, shifting rivers, and perhaps invasions may have played a role. When the civilization faded, so did its sanitation system. Later societies had to reinvent the wheel. Thousands of years passed before Europe caught up with what Mohenjo-daro had already achieved. In fact, during the Middle Ages, cities like London were infamous for their filth. Human waste ran through open ditches, spreading plague. People died by the thousands, while the secrets of the Indus toilets lay buried beneath the earth, forgotten. Archaeologists' discovery. When British archaeologists uncovered Mohenjo-daro in the 1920s, they were stunned. They expected ruins of temples and palaces. They did not expect bathrooms and drains in nearly every house. Sir John Marshall, who led the excavations, wrote about the remarkable attention to sanitation. For him, the discovery changed how scholars viewed ancient people. No longer could we dismiss them as primitive. They were engineers, planners, and designers. Even today, tourists marvel at the sight of those ancient brick drains. You can still walk the streets of Mohenjo-daro and imagine the sound of water flowing beneath your feet. Why it still matters. The story of the world's oldest toilet system is more than just a curiosity. It's a reminder that progress is not always a straight line. Sometimes what we think of as modern was already known thousands of years ago. It also shows that civilizations rise and fall not only on their monuments, but on their infrastructure, the invisible systems that keep life possible. A palace can inspire awe, but a toilet system keeps people alive. Clapperboard closing lines. So the next time you flush a toilet, remember, you're part of a story thousands of years old. Long before modern plumbing, the people of the Indus Valley were already solving the same problem, with ingenuity and care. Their toilets may be silent ruins now, but their wisdom flows on, reminding us that even the most ordinary parts of life can be the foundation of civilization.